Okay, by now most of you already know that I will be out of work for another 3 weeks. To make my life more fun, my septic tank overflowed. $250 for the upgrade. To warm up, I took a walk around the neighborhood. I'll be honest, 75% of my neighbors are jerks, but with the few I like, I'll stop and talk. I was telling my friend Brian about my problems with the septic tank and found out that he had worked in this field for 11 years. This is not your tank. I bet you 6 cans of beer that your filter is clogged. I didn't know septic tanks had filters, but they do. Brian explained what I needed to do and then spent 20 minutes telling me about what he was finding in septic systems. The work was particularly notable, where he took off the lid to check the filter and found that it was clogged with almost 30 protective equipment. He said he was joking a little bit about how maybe from now on the owner needs to throw them in the trash, when he suddenly noticed how pale the guy was. It seems that in 18 years of living together, they have never used a protective agent. And how did it turn out? Damn, I don't know. I cleaned the filter, and he wrote me a check. However, when I left, he was wearing a pair of kitchen gloves, and he was putting all the rubber bands in a small bucket. And we left. Well, isn't that wonderful, I thought, looking down. Beth ran screaming into the living room, saying that the toilet had exploded. Apparently, that was the case. Knowing full well that Beth wouldn't do that, I cleaned up the bathroom, then went outside to check the plug for cleaning. As soon as I opened it, the stream gushed out and I had to go take a shower. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was wondering how expensive an emergency call would be when Beth walked past me with a suitcase in her hand. I'm going to live with my sister until you fix this. Call me when you're done with this. I went back inside and undressed right at the back door. To hell with it, I'm going to take a shower. Water can just flow through the backyard. As the water washed over me, I thought about my life. He has been married for 18 years, one daughter is 17, works as a counselor at a summer camp, saving every cent for college. I was thinking about Beth and the growing distance between us. I think I was even more ignorant and clumsy now than when we first got married. She was only 41 years old, and she was still pretty. Maybe it was a woman's thing. I read about the early onset of menopause when I was in the doctor's office last month. Maybe that's how it was. Anyway, her attitude was starting to be transmitted to Amy, and the pain on her face when her mother left was more than I was willing to bear. We were going to talk when she got home. I had reached my limit, and honestly, if she didn't like it, I didn't give a shit. I'm tired of living in a toxic environment. After cleaning up, I decided to go to the pub, eat one of these wonderful burgers, and maybe have a couple of beers. And I would make sure that if I needed to go to the bathroom, I would do it there. I was coming out and saw Gus picking up his evening paper. The light bulb lit up. Gus used to have a wastewater treatment service. He would still have connections, and maybe he could invite someone. I stopped, and we chatted nonstop for a few minutes before I got to my question. He laughed. Do you want to save $250? Damn right I would. How? I bet the tank is not full. I think your filter is clogged. All you have to do is clean it out. I'll tell you what. I'll come by tomorrow after church and show you how to fix it. I was so happy that I invited him and his wife to the pub. They spent the next 2 hours talking about the strange things they had pulled out of the septic tanks. It seems his wife, Mabel, was the dispatcher where he worked and sometimes gave him a ride if nothing happened. One woman lost her wedding ring, and she paid for the entire tank to be filtered in search of it, but found it only behind a plant on her counter. The other guy followed them to the dump. He seemed to think he was about to be caught, and flushed $80,000 worth of illegal substances down the toilet. They did find illegal substances, and he got a good long prison sentence. The next day, they were at my place at 1:30. We found the lid and pulled it off. There was a filter, clear as day. Gus told me to keep an eye on the hose while he pulled it. He started grinning about when he was halfway up. His wife looked down and giggled. I found your problem, Chad. Maybe from now on you want to throw it in the trash. I looked at what he was holding in his hands. My filter was clogged with protective equipment. 23, as I found out later. I was stupidly wondering how a pack of protective equipment managed to get into my septic system. Then it dawned on me exactly how. Something must have shown on my face because Gus and Mabel were silent for a minute. I'm sure there's an explanation for this, Chad. Have you had any visitors lately? Or maybe Amy had any friends when you weren't there? Really, Mabel? Do you think I'm going to receive guests long enough for them to do it so many times? Or that my 17-year-old daughter is suddenly having orgies? No, there is only one explanation here. They spent another 45 minutes coaxing me before they left. I waited until they were gone, took out some thick rubber gardening gloves, and carefully collected the protective equipment, putting them in a 3-layer bag, then in a plastic container, and put it in a small freezer on top of my store refrigerator. Then I went into the house to think. A lot of things fell into place. We're done. No negotiations, no apologies. A finished marriage. Only one thing kept me from pulling the trigger. I wanted to know who it was. I didn't bother to call Beth. Let her stay where she was for a while. I needed to make a plan. I spent the rest of the day in my store. Amy had to be picked up the next day, and I had already taken a day off for that. It was the first time I had seen her in the last 7 weeks. She hugged me tightly and told me about some of the adventures she had when she was arguing with 11-year-old girls who thought they were 20. Are they really that young? Damn, am I getting old? It wasn't until we were almost home that she asked about her mother. I told her about the septic tank. So it's already been fixed? Yes, it has already been fixed. Does Mom know? No. I tried to call you last night and this morning. Remember, she was supposed to be with me when I picked you up? We had planned a whole day of family activities. Amy took out her phone and called her aunt. Is Mom there? No. Honey, your mom is at work. Good. Then why did everyone say she wasn't there when I called? Uh, That's the thing. Mom should call me back from her office phone, not her cell phone, in the next 20 minutes. If not, I'll ask Dad to take me to check it out. And if she rejected her own daughter because of some stupid business, this little bird is going to sing to her father. I know something. 20 minutes. 30 minutes later, she called, out of breath. Hi, honey. I'm so glad you're home. Yes, I realized that when you went out to meet the bus. Something happened to me. I can just bet. Goodbye, Mom. She called me, ranting about how disrespectful she was. Well, look who taught her. This will happen tomorrow before the tank is pumped out. Amy's going to be at my parents' tonight if you're interested. I won't. I hung up the phone and looked at Amy. She sighed. So you found out about it. What are you going to do? And before you get mad at me for not telling you, I found out about it at summer camp. Jenny, my best friend, had a cousin named Tony who has a boyfriend, Jack, who lives 3 houses down from us. He told Tony what he had seen, who told Jenny, and Jenny told me. Well, then it's straight from the mouth. This must be the gospel. Sarcasm doesn't suit you, at least not in relation to your daughter. I was going to tell you about it tonight. What are we going to do? You're going to graduate from high school, have a prom in your senior year. Most likely, you will end up in a single-parent family. No matter how old you are, the judge will probably let you choose who you want to live with. I'll respect your decision. If it's your mom, just tell me that you won't cut me out of your life. What do you think? I think you're a pretty ignorant guy most of the time. Of course I'll choose you. I could never manipulate her the way I can manipulate you. She spent so little time with us, even in the same house, that I bet she couldn't have picked me out of the crowd. But what I really need to do right now is get rid of the taste of camp food in my mouth. I'd kill for a decent pizza or a good burger. So if you want to get to the heart of your only child, do it through my stomach. I took her to a local pizzeria and watched as she destroyed 3/4 of a large pizza for meat lovers with cheese added. She leaned back in her chair, belched, and asked me what I was going to do with her mother. She was acting mature and tough, but I could see the little girl in her eyes. It must have been hard for us. I took her hand. Let me tell you, Andy, what my priorities are. First of all, I have to be absolutely sure that I'm handling this right. In the coming months, I need to figure out how to minimize the consequences of the divorce for you. Right now, you're the number one person in my life. I want you to be safe and happy as much as I can make you. A lot depends on how your mother reacts. I promise you that I will do everything possible to keep you out of the middle of things. But Pumpkin, if what I suspect is true, my marriage to your mother is over. It was a surreal conversation with our daughter, but I've always asked her to be involved in important family decisions since she turned 14. Of course, she couldn't participate in some decisions, but I tried to involve her in everything else. When she was 15, we needed a car. Although Mom wanted a small sports car, she agreed with me in favor of an SUV. In the end, I got behind the wheel anyway, drove Tony and her friends around the neighborhood, and Beth got her little car for the next year. It was I who taught her to think before making a decision and to consider all sides before giving advice. This has benefited her. making her a natural leader and confessor for her group of friends. You need to figure out how to keep the house, at least until I graduate from high school. Then give it to her if it helps you financially. I'm going to declare anyway, right? The money will be there, won't it? I hastened to assure her. Darling, you have enough money in your deposit to last the first 3 years. Even if your mother doesn't help, I'll have enough time to find the money to pay for your final year of study. I give you my solemn promise. We returned home, and I left her unpacking and thinking. By this point, there were only two things I wanted to know about her mother. How soon could we get divorced? And which asshole is she making love to? In the end, it was pretty simple. All the high-tech gadgets that you can buy online can't compare to the good old camera trap. Well, maybe I misspoke. The camera traps that I borrowed from my brother were the most modern, and, when activated, shot a 30-second video before moving on to photography. It gave you a timestamp and could be programmed to zoom in when activated. They even had an audio recording, but they were usually so far away from their targets that they could barely pick up anything. It took a little brainstorming to figure out how to hide them, but with the help of my brother, I built 2 birdhouses, each of which had a camera. I hung one on a tree by the driveway that activated whenever someone drove up, and the other on a pole pointing directly at the front door. I didn't need to see them do nasty things. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. She said something insinuating about installing birdhouses at the end of the summer, and I told her that it was to let them air out so that the birds would think they were a natural part of the yard. Of course, I was blowing a lot of smoke. What the hell did I know about how a bird chooses a nest? She just shrugged and ignored them. That's how it worked. She worked for a company that had a flexible schedule, so 2 or 3 times a week she took 2 hours for lunch, working overtime or coming in early to do her job. Her boyfriend must have worked there too. She got home 30 minutes before him, grabbed a sandwich, and took off her clothes. He'd show up, they'd make love for 30 minutes, then get dressed and leave. She was going back to work, and he was killing time until he got back. Sometimes he stayed at my house, drank 1 or 2 of my beers. Homemade beer, which a friend supplied me with. I'm surprised I didn't notice this sooner. Maybe Tony was right, maybe I was really ignorant. Damn childish, but when I found out, I put all the beers except 1 or 2 in the refrigerator at the store. They were old-fashioned bottles with ceramic lids and rubber washers, about 24 ounces full. I took the ones I left in the house, drank about a quarter of them, and poured fresh urine. Then I shook them well and put them back. I'd be grinning like crazy when I came home and found an empty bottle on the counter. I could have made him sick, but didn't I care? About once a week, I took the lid off the septic tank and pulled out the protective equipment. They were busy little bees, on average twice a session. No wonder she didn't feel any enthusiasm for me. It took me 3 weeks of careful preparation, but everything was set up and ready to go. I wouldn't let Tony be there when all this happens. No one deserved to see a parent humiliated the way I intended. I thought about inviting the neighbors, but then changed my mind. Instead, I installed 2 video cameras and started shooting them. Brian had an old boombox that used cassettes. I put it next to my dresser, where it was barely visible. I tried to calculate the time so that the boombox would work immediately after they stripped naked. The tape was running. At first, an empty tape until it got to the sounds that I recorded. I checked the speaker and it turned out to be loud. Boom! The sound of a shotgun blast and the crack of breaking wood. I went to Habitat and bought an old door which I installed in the forest and shot. As soon as the shot rang out, they heard my scream. Very little of it was acting. I had a lot of pent-up rage, and I let it loose. You're a lying cheater. The shotgun fired again. I'm going to shoot him. Then I'll shove this shotgun into you and pull the trigger until it runs out. I bet I've watched this scene 100 times and still can't help but laugh. They stormed out the front door and rushed to their cars. All he was wearing was a white shirt, trousers, a jacket, and a tie, which he held in his hands. Later, I found his boxers on the bedroom floor. I walked around the house and went to him. He screamed like a girl and jumped into his car. That's when he noticed the gift I left him. I took 2 buckets of 20 liters each, immersed about 15 liters of septic fluid and several solid particles in each protective agent, and divided the protective equipment equally. Just before the tape recorder went off inside, I put them on the driver's seat. It serves this dumbass right for leaving his car unlocked in an unfamiliar area. Beth ran out screaming. She was wearing a white blouse that she was trying to get into. At the same time, she was trying to pull up her brown skirt. She locked her car meticulously, even at home. But I had a key. She was fumbling with her keys when I went to her before I realized the door wasn't locked. She jumped in, opened the door, and tried to start the engine. It took about 15 seconds for it to sink in. I think she realized what I had done. She was screaming at me, struggling to get out of the car. I slammed the door, almost hitting her leg. Don't even think about getting your shit covered ass out. Better yet, keep going. I'm still removing the lid from the septic tank. I could take you inside and close the lid. You could probably last an hour or two paddling like a dog, but eventually you'll get tired and just slip under the water. Now that I know that all I have to do is change the filters, it may take another 20 years before I have to pump it. By then, you'd only have a few big bones left, and I doubt he'd be sucking them into his hose. The more I think about it, the more I like it. I pulled out my bunch of keys to unlock the door. She put the car in gear and flew back. She took out one neighbor's mailbox and knocked over another. She was flying out of our dead end at an alarming rate. "Hey!" I shouted, knowing she couldn't hear me. "This is a 40-kilometer-per-hour zone. Slow down your ass. This is not a residential area. This is a neighborhood." Okay, I was a big fan of Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor until it turned out what a perverted asshole Bill was in real life and what a bastard Richard turned into. This line was from an old comedy album that my dad had. I can't remember who exactly said that. I told Tony about what I had done, omitting a few details, when she returned home from school. She was shocked that her old man could do something like that, but then it made an impression on her. And people are wondering who I inherited my personality from. It's just priceless. Aren't you mad about the way I treated your mother? No, you didn't physically hurt her, and she kind of deserved it. I bet she'll remember this day for a long time. Now come on, help me pack her things. And be careful. You've already had your revenge. Therefore, we carefully packed her clothes, cosmetics, and jewelry. When Tony found the underwear, she took a pair of scissors and cut everything in half. I think the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Mom's not answering her phone, she told me, coming out with the last batch. She's at Aunt Gwen's. I just talked to her. I think she owes her mom for covering up her little adventures. It's a pity Uncle Jack found out anyway. I'll be back soon. You're holding a gun on her right now, Dad. Maybe you should think about changing the locks tomorrow. It took 3 hours before she returned. Mom is just desperate. She kept saying over and over that it shouldn't have been like this. I think she feels serious remorse about her choice. If you can believe it, she wants to come home. I convinced her to give you a few days to calm down. Aunt Gwen followed me, asking if I thought you could get over it and take her back. I just grinned and got into my car. I was still in full pain relief mode and asked to notify her at work. Gwen was supposed to come and pick her up. By striking first, I got temporary custody. Despite the fact that I threatened to show everyone my record, she challenged the divorce and convinced the judge to schedule a consultation. I was categorically against it, but my lawyer advised me to put up with it and play along. 8 sessions. To my surprise, I even liked some of it. The woman we visited was our age, moderately attractive and well-built. I noticed that she didn't have a ring. At the very first meeting, she asked us what we hoped to get out of these classes. Beth went first. "I want my husband and daughter back. I want to go home and rebuild our marriage." I kept a straight face. Then it was my turn. "I'd tell you it's a waste of your time, Ms. Turner, but it's not, because whatever the result, you're going to get paid anyway. Don't worry. I will do my best to stay calm. I will really participate to the best of my ability. But I wouldn't want to stay married to Beth for the world. She messed up everything, and the damage is too deep. What I expect to get from these sessions is your written opinion that this marriage is not salvageable. So let's get started, shall we? I'm sorry you feel that way about it, Chad. I think, why are you apologizing, Miss Turner? We have to be honest here. If that's how I feel, and I'm happy with my decision, why should it lead to sadness? I think I caught her off guard. Well, I'm here to help you find your way, talk about your difficulties, and see if we can solve them. Miss Turner, really? I'm not lost. I don't need help finding my way. My path is clear, and I see only one chain of footprints on it. I already have my own solution. As far as I understand, you are here to try to force me to accept an alternative that I find completely unattractive and impossible. I'm here to tell you that you're pissing in the wind. But hey, I'm paying for these sessions. I should at least extract some entertainment value from them. By all means, go ahead. I got to her. Chat, Mr. Jones, you know I have to report to the judge. If you refuse to cooperate or do not participate, it may work against you. Am I refusing to cooperate? I think I'm very active. I did most of the talking here. And, Ms. Turner, I don't respond well to threats, veiled or otherwise. This is one of the reasons I record these sessions on tape. I put my little dictaphone, which had been working all this time, on the table. Mr. Jones, you have no right to record these sessions on tape. Why not? Can you, but I can't? As a bill-paying person, I have the right to guarantee that I pay my money according to what I deserve. I won't let you do that. And now, I stood up, picking up my dictaphone. We're done, Ms. Turner. Tomorrow I will officially ask another therapist if I can get to the judge. I am sure that this recording will play an important role in his decision. I wish you a pleasant evening. I left both her and Beth with their mouths open. My lawyer convinced the judge to appoint someone else, an elderly woman who didn't care if I was taping meetings. Everything went pretty smoothly. There were many times when Beth begged for a second chance, and I said no. The only heated conversation happened when she tried to convince both the consultant and me that it was just a short affair. She went too far. She wanted to end it, blah, blah, blah. I threw my whole body at her. I'm not sure how time frames work in the world of traders. How long does an affair last, as opposed to a full-blown, ongoing affair? Is an affair less destructive to a marriage? 41 times. It wasn't an affair. None of you were going to stop before you were caught. 41 times. It took a lot of planning, a lot of coordination. It wasn't an affair, Beth. It was a carefully planned plan of action. You guys were pretty smart. It could have dragged on for years if you hadn't clogged the sewer pipe. But you were caught. Quite dramatic, it seemed to me. I couldn't help but laugh a little. Beth went to her sister, and she wouldn't let her on the doorstep until she undressed and threw her things in the trash. Even after 5 showers, she still smelled. The repairman cleaned her car, but she had to replace the driver's seat. I do not know what happened to her lover, but he was imprisoned about a week after Beth. I think her sister let slip most of the story a few weeks later, after she'd had a little too much at a local bar. The classes were pretty boring. By the 4th week, we were just doing all the necessary things. Beth cried, but I remained stoic. The consultant announced this at the 6th session, and 4 months later Beth and I were the proud owners, at least in my case, of a set of brilliant new divorce resolutions. It seemed to me that the agreement was quite reasonable. Instead of child support, Beth had to pay half of the mortgage on the house and continue to contribute to Tony's college fund. There were only 10 payments left, so it was pretty much a washout. As soon as Tony graduated from high school, we sold the house and split the money. We got a good price, even in an economic downturn. I took my half and bought a house 5 houses down. The plot was larger. There was an extra bedroom, and there was even a swimming pool in the backyard, the only one in the area. It was an urgent sale, and I bought it for about 2/3 of what it was actually worth. I only needed to finance $20,000. It was like a car loan. I paid him off in 4 years. Tony was doing well in college. She started bringing her 2 roommates to her house on breaks. I found them jobs for the summer, and when they had a day off, they spent as little time as possible by the pool. As a result, I had a lot of college-age visitors, men and women. I've become something of an urban legend. I was a department head at a company that produced brake parts for high-end cars, mainly for Mercedes and BMW, but also for Bentley and Land Rover. I earned what many shift managers at other factories earned. I did my job well, and my bosses were happy with me. I didn't even think about a relationship until Tony was in her 3rd year of college. I didn't really want that. Oh, I've had a few privileged girlfriends over the years, but nothing serious. Then Colette went to work. She was invited to head another department. We talked mostly about work, but once a month the managers went to the local pub to get some fresh air and relax. 3 months later, I asked her out on a date, and she agreed. There was a spark, but we took our time with it. It took almost 4 months before we started getting closer. She seemed a little surprised, then hid her smile with difficulty. Soon she was laughing. Then she told me her story. She was married, like me, to someone very similar to my ex. There was no preparation, very little lubrication, just kick him in the ass. She would get used to it, that was his motto. Since she didn't, he started gathering playmates who would agree. Colette told me that when she found out about this, she bought an old blender at Goodwill, put on rubber gloves, took some scissors and filled a blender full of poison oak and ivy leaves. She rubbed the leaves, sifting them through a sieve until she had about an ounce of juice left. Then she took a hypodermic needle and carefully inserted it into a half-empty tube of lubricant, putting it back in its hiding place. A week later, she got a call from the hospital. They had to rush her husband there. It looks like he had a severe allergic reaction to something. She laughed. When I got there, he was lying on his back, his robe was pulled up because he was extremely sensitive to touch. I swear, he was so bloated that he looked like a star. I talked to the doctor, and he was trying to determine the cause of this reaction. I looked at my husband like I was dead. The doctor had a very funny expression on his face, and one of the nurses dropped her tablet. "Don't come home, darling, or next time I'll do something irreparable with your stuff. Doc, if you have a cheater here with the same symptoms, you might want to check her out. You will have a pleasant evening." When I was leaving, I heard the doctor tell the nurse to check on the women in room 312. It was on the same floor, so I popped in. She was lying on her stomach with her ass in the air. She was so swollen and red, I swear she looked like a space alien. She couldn't see who came in because of her position, so she asked if I could give her something stronger for the pain. I slapped her ass so hard that I thought I broke my arm. She screamed, and I bent down to make sure she could hear me. It won't take away the pain, but it will give you the opportunity to focus on something else. I'm the wife of the man you made love to. I added poison ivy juice to the grease. Next time it might be acid. Think about it, cheater, the next time you decide to use another woman's husband. I was sweating for several days, expecting to be arrested, but I think the disclosure of the secret was worse than their punishment, because I never heard a word. I just stared at her with my mouth open while she looked tense. Suddenly I grinned. "I think I love you." She smiled back. "You know better." A few months later, we decided that yes. Tony loved her and understood when she couldn't bring her roommates the following summer. We needed bedrooms. Colette had a 16-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. Tony and her daughter Joy were bridesmaids, and her son Bill walked her down the aisle. It took several months before we moved into the family apartment. When the time came, Tony showed joy at graduating from her old campus, and 2 years later, Bill received a tennis scholarship. We're a few years older now. The children came here for our 15th wedding anniversary. Tony is married and has 2 children. Joy has 3 children, and Bill brought his husband and adopted daughter with him. The grandchildren were splashing in the pool. The children watched them and cooked the food. We just sat there like honored guests. From where I'm sitting, I can see a small decoration on the fence. Colette was a pretty talented artist, and she painted accents on our mailboxes, birdhouses, and fences. The one I was looking at was so tiny that it was barely noticeable. We never needed it. As for what happened to Beth, who the hell cares? End.